In this hour, we'll be exploring the world of neutral host and private networks. Now, Telco Forge was built from the fact that in many corners of the industry, you'll find people who are disgruntled about how things in the telecoms industry don't seem to be quite working the way they maybe ought to. So with initiatives like Forging Ahead, we're trying to highlight people that are doing things differently and who might be the keys to making people gruntled again in the industry. But we're not just showing you in the audience, we're also introducing them to a number of experts from different parts of the telecoms world to get their reactions, questions and comments. So in terms of format, if you're familiar with briefings to the press and the media, this might ring some bells. In this hour, I'll give Morgan Kirby, the CMO at Proptivity, some time to introduce what they're doing in 10 minutes or less. But the majority of the hour is for conversations and questions arising from that introduction. It's unlikely to be a straightforward ride for Morgan, unfortunately for him, as analysts make their careers in saying quite plainly what they think and asking difficult questions. So those of you in the audience are welcome to chime in with questions in the chat, which I'll pick up and pass on as well. And then towards the end of the hour, I'll try and bring that together into some concrete ideas and recommendations for how to move forward. So putting Morgan to the test today, we have two long-time pillars of the analyst community. We've got Matt Hatton, the co-founder of Transformer Insights, and Dean Bubley, the founder of Disruptive Analysis. We'll be hearing plenty from Dean and Matt soon, but for now, I'd like to hand over to Morgan to introduce Proptivity. All yours, Morgan.
Thanks very much for having me. So Morgan Kirby here. I'm the head of marketing for Proptivity. We are a Nordic-based neutral host, I guess we can call ourselves. We maybe Dean and then the analysts can come up with a better word for what we are. I don't know. There's no real kind of telco lingo, but we can call ourselves a neutral host. We focus solely on indoor 5G, and we deal mostly in commercial real estate, meaning office, CBD office environments. We are owned by a property service company in Nordics called Stronghold, similar to CBRE, JLL-ish type. Perfect.
Great.
Shall I dig into our demo or at least a brief explanation of what we are trying to do and doing? So we are founded by this company called Stronghold because they are doing services towards real estate, and the whole premise of Proptivity was that they talked to a lot of their customers, and they had a lot of issues of trying to solve indoor coverage, and this was in the 4G age, and they felt that this will only become worse and 5G will exacerbate that. So they wanted a company who could kind of offer a solution to property owners, which was simpler than it was before. So that's why Proptivity was created. We can take the next slide. This is a picture of a office we have recently built, and if you are eagle-eyed, you can spot the 5G dot down in the corridor. This is a very kind of attractive office building in Oslo. This is a like 10,000 square meter building with a property owner, and they have their headquarters, and this is the reception in their headquarters. They wanted 5G in their building and in their office because of employees having phones, which they didn't want to put on their Wi-Fi. They have a lot of partners coming into their building, which has their own phones with them. They have consultants coming in with also with their own phones and with their own operators. And of course, they have customers coming to this extremely attractive office and visitors in general. And they are really keen on making sure that everyone coming into that space have coverage for their own digital needs and from all the operators. So this is more or less recently finished, and it's up and running with multi-operator coverage from Proptivity. So this is one example. The next here is another building we have built in Denmark, in Copenhagen. This is a a very famous retail kind of center in the city of Copenhagen called York's Passage, and this is inside one of their stores. And retailers we talk to more and more, they are more or less digitalizing everything based on customers' phones. And they also see the same trend. Whoever we speak to say that people do not log on to their supplied Wi-Fi, even if the coverage is poor. They instead leave the store. So they need to secure coverage in locker rooms, by the kind of self-pickup locker cabinets and the cashiers when they're trying to pay. So retailers really focus on making sure that all the customers can have access with their phone. So that's another use case. And the third use case I bring, next picture. This is in the basement of, I think, the same building. No, actually, this is in UK. Sorry, this is in UK. So this is also part. If you can spot the dot in the far far corner here, you can see that this is also spaces where we see property owners become much more careful now, for security reasons, for one purpose. So making sure that everyone who is in their buildings, if it's their own staff, service personnel, or customers, tenants, visitors, they need to have coverage everywhere where there could be an issue, and that could be like here, like the bicycle storage area, the garage area, the IT environments, the elevators, the staircases, all the shared areas they want to have covered, from security, but also from a pure kind of user experience. People do not want to have team calls dropping out when they go from the car to the office. So basic coverage in all shared areas. That's more or less what we hear as a demand from grade A properties, meaning the properties where they expect to have higher the rents. Yeah, so that leads basically to the fact that one of our sister companies, Newsec, have done a lot of research into this, and nowadays you have like 60-70% of tenants reinforcing that mobile coverage needs to be part of the leasing agreement when they want to have a new office. So suddenly mobile coverage becomes a part of what you look for in a new office. And if you're a retailer in your new retail store as well. We can take the next. There is though a challenge here that what we do today is that we are really focused on creating air gapped buildings with low emission glass windows. You have insulation material. We are using higher frequencies which penetrate even worse into buildings. So gradually we have building owners coming back to us and saying, hey, we have just launched this fancy new building. We are trying to get £1,000 per square meter, but there is no coverage. There's no signal inside. We need to fix it now, please. So this is becoming a more and more common story we hear. So we call it the green paradox. We can take the next. This one, I'm sure you guys are familiar with. This is the new Meta display glasses. Finally, it seems like this AR thing is happening a bit. I have yet to try these glasses, but I'm looking forward to it. So 5G laptops, AR glasses. There are devices now coming online which could actually create even more demand on having capacity and performance inside, because this is where you are using these things mostly. So that could actually create even higher demand on indoor coverage at the same time as we are basically making it more difficult for signals to penetrate buildings. So definitely a paradox situation we're going for. We can take the next. The driving forces for property owners to actually do anything here is this 15%. That's more or less the valuation increase they have if they do a green building. So there is a push in the property market to create green certified buildings, meaning that they are also becoming more isolated from signals. So these trends kind of go in the opposite direction, but that's also why we exist. So what do we put in place? And here, I guess most people who have been in this industry, indoor coverage, kind of strengthening solutions is not a new thing. It's an old thing, maybe 90s, perhaps something. You started introducing passive DAS systems based on analog distribution of signals, coax cables. Then last, I don't know, years, you have started with active DAS solutions, still using analog signal integration, but you are distributing indoor signals on fiber or Ethernet. And now we are more or less where we are today, using small cell type of solutions. We are using, for example, the Ericsson DOT solution. Also, I'm lacking of a good name for this segment, but let's call it small cells, even if it's not super true. And this is a comparison we did between one of the active DOS solutions and the small cell solution when we, I think this was done for UK, where we see that a small cell solution where you have up to maybe 6 times the capacity. And here, of course, nothing is, you can, of course, create a lot of capacity on an active DOS solution, but it's not efficient and it's not going to be cost efficient. So there's the property owners will never pay for that, and it's not really energy efficient. Normally, the antenna sizes on active DOS is quite big compared to the footprint of a small cell solution, and energy consumption, which is basically the killer here. No property owner wants to have heat created in the basement and losses and paying for that. And also this ESG green aspect of this is not very, well, not what you want to have on your or PR sheet in the market. So, and if we go to the next slide, so what do we actually do then? What is Propertivity? So when we try to create a solution for property owners, we went from trying to solve the challenges and the things they felt was difficult, meaning integrate discussions and negotiations with operators was difficult. Technology was difficult. Managing projects, IT, radio design, and managing mobile operators was difficult. So we put that together. We offer to do all of that in a single kind of contract. They deal with us, and we deal with the rest. We design, we finance, we build, we install, we manage, and we negotiate with operators, and we connect operators. Everything in a fixed kind of yearly fee bill towards the property owners. We only deal more or less, no, today we only deal with properties where property owners are interested to pay to secure and fix the coverage problems inside their building. So it's a property owner market, owner pay market, so to speak, if we take the US lingo. And then, of course, whoever wants to use these signals that we have distributed from all the operators, they go to the operators. So they buy services as normal from mobile operators, and we are just a very kind of boring infrastructure operator in the bottom, securing the coverage. And of course, managing it 24/7, making sure that it's up and running and securely. We can take the next. We have launched built in UK, we have built in Norway, we have built in Denmark, we have built in Sweden, and we are ongoing also in Italy now. So here you see a snapshot of operators and property customers and partners we are working with. And of course, our technology partner today has been Ericsson so far. So that was, I don't know how many minutes I did, but hopefully I was within the time.
Yeah, that was fine. Thanks, Morgan. It was pretty darn close. And at this point, I'm going to turn things over to our experts for their responses and questions to Morgan. I mean, I have a few questions up my sleeve, and I'll chime in with any questions or comments from the audience that come through as well. But just to start with, I mean, Dean, when you're faced with an introduction like this, and I know that you've attended quite a few briefings in your time, what are you looking for? And is there anything from what you've heard that you'd like Morgan to fill in extra?
Right. I mean, this is well. First off, I should say that I had slight trouble with the slides and video platform, and so luckily I'm familiar with the Proptivity offer. I know that company for quite a while, so I know the background story on it. I'll be honest, from a briefing point of view, I might say stick to familiar platforms for presenting them from a technical point of view might be one. But I mean, more generally, I would say understanding what the dependency, if anything, is on the government and policy and regulatory environment. There's certainly some countries which encourage indoor connectivity and others which seem to overlook it. And the other side to this is, I think there's some countries where there are good relationships between neutral host providers and mobile operators, but there's others where that doesn't occur. And so understanding what the relationship dynamics are and how those may change over time. The other question is, I mean, this is great for those buildings where the building owner, or if it's a tenant, if it's a shared property, I assume, is prepared to pay, but convincing them of the value of that must be quite difficult, and particularly in those where they've got their own internal uses rather than being visitor led. I'm curious to know what the proposition would be. So there's a bit of a stream of consciousness there, but I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. And so, I mean, there's two questions there. One about the business model in terms of the customers, and one about the government relations and endorsement. When I will give you the chance to comment on that, Morgan, but Matt, before we go on, I just want to check with you in case there's anything that that you were thinking about there, hearing that kind of ties in, and that we might as well cover at the same time.
That's me unmuted. Hello. Yeah, I mean, to come back to your original question, really, I have not spoken to Proptivity before. Therefore, my overriding desire is just to make sure that I get it and understand what the proposition looks like. And I've been making a note of a few questions, but ones that specifically relate to what Dean's already asked, so may make sense to sort of tackle alongside. You mentioned about there being a premium of 15% on properties where if they're green, essentially. I'm summarizing somewhat. It'd be interesting to know if there's a similar sort of figure you could put on it if they are connected, right? I mean, it's the same sort of dynamic as the question that Dean was asking. I've also got a few questions around business model and some other elements of the proposition, but if we that was the one that was specifically related to the thing that Dean was asking. So yeah, just to elaborate on that a bit as well.
Great.
But
Thanks.
do come back to me. I've got a bunch.
Definitely, no problem. But Morgan, would you like to reply to some of that at the moment?
Yeah. Interesting questions and very relevant, of course. I can start with this valuation. I just had we had an event in London a couple of weeks ago, and there we had WiredScore on stage. They had just, I guess, paid for a study, for research. I can't remember the name of the research company now, but they had concluded 5.1%.
Okay. Interesting.
So pretty exact. But no, and I think the whole kind of WiredScore Platinum driving force is now, especially in their release 4, I think it's of their platform now, in their kind of certification logic, they are putting a lot of emphasis on mobile coverage, not just the preparedness for fiber and connectivity and so on. So I think there is, but I think it's slightly more difficult to say. But 5.1% was what they had concluded was a well-connected building with certifications around that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount which is about the fiber access to the building, and actually, I mean, it'd be interesting to see if I know that Ookla now is also certifying buildings for connectivity. So
Yeah.
I'd be interesting to see if we can get a comparison and contrast over the next sort of 12 months or so, and see what changes there.
Yeah, and then we started talking about the regulations, and I can maybe, I mean, from our perspective, we see UK, not from regulatory, but from practical standpoint, the yachts model and the operator driving force in UK has made UK basically the shining star of this. It's still very complex, but it works. And we have also the most amount of neutral hosts doing this and are steaming ahead, and I think more or less every building now being built or renovated in London is having a indoor system. That's kind of where we are now in the industry. So if you're gonna have a grade A building, you are forced to do also mobile kind of strengthening, at least in shared areas. I don't think it's becoming a mandatory kind of office feature yet. But still, so in garage and shared areas, restaurants, a gym, or whatever you have in your building, there you will have to, and elevators and stairs. That's normally where we get the question to start. Can you do this for us? Can you look at that first?
One question that I have, which ties into the regulatory aspect, had a call yesterday with someone from the Safer Buildings Coalition. Are you seeing access to cellular for emergency calling purposes, or by the emergency services themselves as being a catalyst for this?
Yeah, not the emergency services so far. We haven't seen that specified, but I think that's going to come because in Sweden and many other countries, you are starting to reinforce like the cellular coverage as part of the emergency services solution. So I think it will come. What we do here is this: we need to secure security for our tenants and staff and employees, and that means that if something happens, they should be able to make a phone call. So I think that type of security we hear a lot.
Great, thanks. I realise Matt's been very patiently waiting with a list of other questions.
No, that's okay. I mean, to move on to something which is sort of quite related. How about okay? So the business model, to understand it correctly, is the effectively developer pays, the building developer pays, and there's no commercial relationship with the network operator other than providing them with providing their customers with coverage in building. For no charge. But do you get pushback from the network operators? You had a series of logos on the penultimate slide possibly, but do you ever run into friction with them, because obviously you need sign off or approval or some kind of collaboration with them for it to work? So are there logos that don't feature because they basically say no?
Yeah, sure, it is. The country where we are facing most of that is Sweden, where all operators except one have said that we think this is probably the future, but we are waiting and trying to do it ourselves. But the rest of the countries we are in and we are looking at, their operators are willingly connecting to these type of solutions. So I would say in some markets you have a kind of a preference for what kind of solution you are willing to integrate to and how you want to integrate. There we still see some kind of diversification, that some operators still want to connect analog, meaning with radio instead of digital. So that's also a kind of a pushback I guess we get. So there's a mix of, in some countries we have a mix where some operators accept that digital connections is basically the future. They want to do that, and then some operators say no, we want to have full control. We would rather integrate to your system with analog signal. So I think that is the normal fight, not that they don't want to do it at all. That's more uncommon actually.
Interesting. And another follow-up to or a sort of adjacent question to something that Dean asked, which was around the emergency services one. Well, obviously the one of the key things with 5G and emergency services is having dedicated network slices and so on. And that sets me thinking about some of the other 5G standalone functions to do with quality on demand, or, well, slices really, I guess is the point. So there's a question of how much of the functionality of 5G SA are you enabling? Well, obviously it's 5G. Well, you tell me. How much of those additional functions are you enabling?
Since we only do the outer radio layer, we have access to all the features. So operators could do standalone if they want. They can deploy standalone on our infrastructure, and they can do then, of course, slicing on that as well. So the only thing which I guess has as an impact on us, as I know today, would be like positioning, where we would also have to do some sort of feature parity to create positioning support, kind of.
Okay, so it wouldn't be your core; it would be the operator core, and it would
yeah, we don't have core. We only have radio.
Okay, so you don't run a core.
No.
Might you?
No, we do not want to be a operator as a service operator, and we don't want to run our own frequencies, so we run only operator frequencies.
Sure.
So we are basically officially we are borrowing or leasing operator frequencies and redistributing their signals on their frequency license.
Okay, so the functionality that's available is determined by the network operator, but is there any limitation, or is there anything that you need to implement on your access points to enable anything in terms of any of that 5G standalone functionality?
We have in our contracts with the operators, we basically guarantee that we are on the latest software release, and that we have more or less support for anything inside our so on our radio part, which is basically the kind of in Ericsson lingo, it would be the IRU and the baseband and the radio, the dots itself. So those three components, we need to have them upgraded to the latest version all the time.
Okay, good. If only they were upgraded to the latest version, it would be a good position to be in, right?
Yeah, not too far away, at least.
Yeah, not too far away.
Go ahead.
How good is the Ericsson? How good is the Ericsson DOT system at working with non-Ericsson outdoor radio macro networks? So, you know, either presumably they have to coordinate to make sure there's no interference that leaks out the walls and windows, or they have to use a different frequency range. And I would imagine that trying to match an Ericsson indoor system with a Nokia outdoor macro RAN must be an interesting challenge.
It's a good question. To be honest, I'm not sure about the answer, actually. I do know that where we have the same system outside and inside, meaning Ericsson outdoor and Ericsson indoor, we can do kind of clever combination tricks. So basically bringing capacity from the outside inside, and so that is pretty cool. When we speak to operators, actually very few are worried about the what you call it, the interference from the indoor dots to the outdoor. That's very little discussion, actually. We normally see the opposite problem, where we have when you basically are you have a stronger 4G signal on the lower frequency coming into the building, basically becoming your kind of 4G pilot signal, and then you want to have so then you still want to have the data carrier on the indoor 5G, because that's the strongest one, There we see that we sometimes need to work with operators to tweak parameters to make that work better. So this is basically the opposite problem.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I would dynamic frequency planning or frequency reuse is I haven't looked at it for a while, but I assume it's part and parcel of 5G generally, right? But
and it also depends. I mean, if you take the UK, there it's basically everything we can get better is better, and they're not so worried about the interference because it's quite low quality outdoor anyway. So there, all the signals we can boost is good.
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of a shock. I had a question here, which is when you're working with different operators, is there much of a difference in terms of their responsiveness? So for example, if you're preparing one of these buildings, do you have a sort of time to connection that varies drastically between telcos?
Yeah, sure. And it also varies on times, meaning over what are they doing in terms of projects in other things? What's their focus? It's basically the same radio teams normally we work with who's doing all other things. So yeah, it differs a lot. But then what we are trying to do is to become more self-reliant. For example, we are trying to build up hub sites. So we connect operator signals into our hub sites, and then we are responsible for distributing that signals to our buildings. So we are then more responsible. In UK, we are responsible for everything from the hub site and onwards, which makes it much easier and simpler and more effective. So basically limiting the impact on operators, tech teams, radio teams. So we do more of the work. But yeah, it differs between countries for sure, and operators.
Thanks. To turn this back to Matt and Dean, I'd like to ask you about how you see what Morgan's been talking about fitting in with your understanding of the telecoms world and or how that's changing, because you know, it can be interesting to take a company in isolation and explore it, but also just understanding that wider context is something which, you know, as analysts you're very well positioned to do. So it would be good to get a sense from you, and maybe you can start on this, Dean, to sort of see if what Proptivity is doing is part of a general trend or promises to create one. Do you think?
And can I say I'm smiling now because I know that in-building coverage for 5G is one of Dean's bugbears, so I'm going to leave that with him as a thing to talk to.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I've been talking about indoor wireless for more years though, well, frankly, probably since the 2G era, never mind 5G. So you know, I'm very glad to see innovators around sort of neutral host and dedicated indoor wireless systems. I see a number of different models for that around the world. The US tends to have some of this, but actually more other alternative approaches. I think in Europe, you're absolutely right that the UK JOTS model is something where the operators actually collaborate to define some of the baseline specifications for this type of thing, which is something that, yeah, frankly, I would have liked to see the UK Mobile UK Association, Industry Association, to take that around the world and say, hey, look what we've done, you should all do this as well. Or perhaps in conjunction with DCIT or one of the other government departments and tout it as a model which works. There's a number of countries in the Gulf in particular, and then also I'd say South Korea and China, which take indoor wireless seriously. I mean, China actually has dedicated in-building spectrum, a shared band specifically for use between multiple MNOs. So I think this is, it's definitely aligns with my view that we need to spend more time and attention on indoor connectivity, whether that's public cellular, private cellular, Wi-Fi, and then specialized networks for industrial and IoT and audio and video microphones and all the rest of it. So I definitely think that this aligns with that vision of indoor centrality. And I just wish that the 6G standards bodies would understand that, and there'd be some more work items in 3GPP that were, frankly, looking to deal with this sort of ongoing goal of universal connectivity. And there's lots of interest and excitement around satellite for, rural areas, maritime and aviation and so on. And yet we spend 80 to 90% of our time indoors, and there's no real attention paid to it. So I definitely, think that what Proptivity is doing is, it's one of a class of neutral host providers that absolutely are doing the right thing. I think from a publicity point of view, you also talk about it more. There's not just events like this, but I see, your and colleagues' posts on social media all the time, and attendance in conferences and events, and I get some others in North America that are doing CBRS based ones, and then there's a few others like the people who were at the TIP indoor session on neutral host recently, like Tawal in the Gulf. But it's it's very good to see. Matt, any additions to that?
On that, that's your as I said, bugbear. It's your core topic. Mine tends to be around, and you did reference IoT in there, and that tends to be my coverage area. And we did some work about this time last year, looking at 5G SA and the opportunity that presents for IoT. And the conclusion was, well, not great. So it's not coming as there's no magic wand for how 5G SA is gonna solve all of IoT's problems. And similarly, in industrial context, not necessarily that private 5G is going to be the big solution there. So what's interesting is seeing different commercial models for putting the capabilities that might be presented by 5G into the hands of potential users. And one of the things I was going to ask about was, obviously you're in and very present in retail. Well, there's all sorts of use cases in retail, payment terminals and stock monitoring and a whole bunch of other use cases. So, and in fact, if I, rather than answering the question, I'm going to ask a question, which is, typical analyst behavior, but there you go. Are you seeing much of that, or is it mostly handset-based stuff and mobile broadband, or are you seeing other device types being used? Because anything that reduces the barriers to entry, or it improves the ability to use to have networks that are more available in more locations will obviously help with rollouts or adoption of IoT specifically. So, question for you, Morgan.
It's a very relevant question actually. And I had a discussion with a large retailer not long ago, and they had like two levels, two kind of different tiers of problems they're trying to solve or opportunities to create. And the first one was coverage for customers' phones, and that was basically the beginning and the end for what they needed to fix immediately, because it's such a nowadays it's so negative, both for the customer's experience but also from the digitalization, which is more or less using apps as self-scanning tools. So that's what they're all talking about first. But then number two in that comes, okay, but if we have this now, then could we use that in our RFID scanners? That's kind of, so they are thinking about it as okay, once we have this in place and we have created this, can we then reduce the load on our Wi-Fi network and basically offload some part of that traffic over to that network? We have been in contact with this RFID scanner company, for example, and the self checkout scanner company. So there are definitely trends but not as
And-
strong as this coverage, kind of normal basic coverage trend.
But then one would think that the willingness to work with neutral host carriers would be then a benefit to network operators wanting to support the type of companies that deploy those, often quite extensive, and usually not using neutral host networks, normally using the macro network. And therefore it should encourage anybody who wants to work with a payment terminal provider or a barcode scanning company or whatever to get on board. One would hope.
Yeah, I see some trends, but on that side of it, I don't see so many operators other than maybe Verizon, kind of international, doing a lot of stuff there. But on local operators, don't see so much focus on those IT type of solutions so far. More like business to business, 5G laptops, security solutions for enterprises and stuff like that. That's what I see a lot of, or happening at least.
Linked to that, I mean, when who are the people you normally deal with at the property or venue company? Is it people who are mostly concerned with visitor and tenant experience? So sort of more thinking about the environment in which the people coming into the building and the services and capabilities they have? Or is it more facilities management? And people who are perhaps looking at smart building technology and the smart operations that you mentioned just there about, say, payment terminals and things like that. Because in other sectors, I mean, I notice in rail, for example, the onboard connectivity in rail depends on the train company, whether it's driven by the customer experience people or the operations people. And there's like two very different buying points which try different solutions.
Or heaven forbid, it's IT.
I mean, I think without having kind of the statistics, but I think most often it's the tenant side who gets complaints, and now when they are now renovating. So normally nothing happens in old buildings, standing assets. It only happens in renovation or in new build, and then the project managers have understood that mobile coverage is something they need to put in the project. So they basically give that task to the contractor or the consultant. And in UK, it's very common that it's those two parties we interface with. So either the consultant or the kind of the building company who then takes responsibility for securing like electricity and coverage and so on. So, and in some countries, it's other types of like in Nordics, it's normally the electro companies who's doing the total electric project. They also get the coverage because it's similar, so they get the responsibility. So those are the type of kind of interfaces. So not so much the operator, the property owners themselves as such. It's more their kind of the partners they are choosing to deploy or to do these projects. But it also differs in countries, I would say.
Linked to that, and coming back a little bit to some of the regulation points, I wonder to what extent Proptivity is active talking to governments. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time this year I've heard of people talking about maybe we need to include, for example, coverage in building codes in the same way that we do with electricity or water or disabled access. And I wonder to what extent that's music to a company like Proptivity, and to what extent you're pushing for that kind of approach.
Definitely, we are pushing because I think it's relevant, and you mentioned, Dean, a couple of examples of this happening outside of Europe, not so much in Europe at the moment. So yeah, we are pushing. We are trying to make kind of push this topic as much as we can to regulators as often we can.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, it sounds like it might be a long process, but have you seen any green shoots or areas that you think we might want to be looking at to where hopefully we'll get some news about that soon?
No, I don't really have any guesses.
I mean, I have to say, well, we'll see if there's anything in the DNA from European Commission in January, but I highly doubt that they're going to put much in it. I say at the moment it's mostly Asian nations and the Gulf, like Saudi and UAE and Bahrain and places where there's lots of high-rise construction in particular that really do insist on this. I saw Tawal, a Saudi tower company that's now doing neutral host, talking about this recently at the Fuse event. But it seems to be a bit of a blind spot in Brussels in particular, although I did hear that the head of spectrum policy for the Commission moved to a new building and it had low E glass. So I think he's getting a crash course in indoor connectivity.
That's funny. It's good.
There's nothing quite like a personal experience to influence things, right?
Yeah. So to sort of change things slightly, Matt and Dean, you've been around the industry and for a few cycles now, and if you're looking at a company like Proptivity, obviously we're hoping it'll succeed, but there have been a lot of companies out there who have seemed very promising, and either they've been acquired or they've gradually disappeared. So I welcome your thoughts. As you've been hearing from Morgan today, are there any concerns or pressures or issues that occur to you that might be risks for them as they're going ahead, or might prevent them from succeeding in the longer term?
I mean, the challenge is, the challenges are many, but one that immediately springs to mind is typically pick your battles. No, don't try and boil the ocean. But the fact that you focused quite narrowly on effectively new build, new fit buildings, rather than just saying, okay, we can do neutral host networks in any kind of scenario. Do stadiums, we can do this, we can do that. You have the ability to go market in quite a targeted way, the property tech shows and those kinds of things, and that obviously stands you in good stead, I think. And I mean, no bad thing being acquired, Alex. It tends to be most people's end goal in the running of companies, but that's another matter entirely. So yeah, having a sort of single-minded focus on a specific area rather than just trying to boil the ocean. I mean, that's my generic point, particularly in a marketing from a marketing angle.
Yeah, from my point of view, I guess, well, the first thing that I'd be curious about would be the length of contracted services. And whether that covers the costs of the upfront implementation and then gives room for margin on top. I mean, clearly, if you sign a deal with a building owner for N years, that's guaranteed cash flow. Assuming that the property company itself doesn't have issues, which I guess at the moment is variable. The other, from a technology point of view, the other thing, I mean, we've studiously avoided mentioning Wi-Fi. And I know from previous discussions with Proptivity, you're very much brought into the sort of Ericsson view of the world of wouldn't it be nice to have cellular for everything everywhere? Whereas for a lot of buildings, increasingly, there is ever more accessible Wi-Fi, and things like open roaming make it easier to use. And so there is, in some sectors, I mean, airports and cafes and smaller premises like that, some potential for substitution. But I think that from a long-term point of view, I guess there's going to be interesting questions around whether this gets treated as an asset class by institutional investors in the same way that they think of towers and fiber and data centers and submarine cables as investable classes. At the moment, I don't see this sort of in-building systems as a discrete asset class that gets as much discussion as those, but maybe that'll change over time.
Thank you. So, I mean, that's a few different points there, and I wonder, Morgan, if you know there's anything that you'd like to pick up on there. I mean, particularly there is this degree of controversy, maybe. I don't know if it's even that around the Wi-Fi question, but you must get asked that a whole lot. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not trying to advocate that this is a replacement of Wi-Fi in any way or sort, but we mostly deal with spaces where you have multiple people coming in, and there we see also the feedback from retailers that people do not log into open Wi-Fi's anymore, and this roaming Wi-Fi stuff, I have never used it. I have never seen it. So the practical sense. So if it's a shared space, I think mobile has a really high kind of applicability, and those are the spaces we do focus on. And then I think over time, what we do see is that once you have this, once we have kind of installed 5G in a kind of shared areas in a building, then next comes, but we need to build in all the offices as well, because the tenants request that there is coverage for visitors and employees, and we have a lot of those discussions. And of course there is Wi-Fi there for sure, but they still want to have an overlay of coverage, of mobile coverage. So I don't think anytime anyway soon this Ericsson vision of the world will take over. But I do see, and we have those discussions, that how can we then go from having 3 parallel overloaded expensive Wi-Fi networks to maybe 2, and we can offload part of that to the building 5G system. So those discussions we do see, and then the whole my favorite topic, 5G laptops. Then we do see that happening more and more. Companies are purchasing much more 5G laptops because the price points are coming down. There's not big difference. I've heard one company who got the modems free of charge, basically same price so it was basically a feature they gave away to a large company, and the large company then are using that to secure connectivity for their staff outside of office. And then the CTIO said to me then, yeah, but if I do that, I have this IT system for everyone outside of the office. Why shouldn't I reuse the same IT system when they are in office? Why should I have 2 different? So can we look at how this works? Can we kind of simplify my world, meaning costs, meaning complexity? So yeah, I don't think I don't try to pitch it against each other. I think there's a huge overlap here where hopefully we can see some benefits going on.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because you must know how much the usage has grown, or what the trends are in usage over the in the deployments that you have. And so obviously that will give you some indication of the extent to which traffic might be migrating over onto 5G rather than making use of the Wi-Fi, because probably the handset will default to Wi-Fi if they're using the Wi-Fi. So can you give us some idea on the trends that you might have seen over time on the volume of traffic that's going through a single access point on a like-for-like basis?
Yeah, I have one example. It's not statistics, but it's we put up a network in Sweden here not long ago, and we basically turned it on, and in, I think it was a week, after a week we checked, and then we had more or less a gig throughput load on that network, and that it was 5,000 square meters. So meaning that we took traffic which was normally then going somewhere else, either on the outdoor network or on Wi-Fi, but we took that traffic. So that was quite surprisingly a lot, which immediately came over to the indoor network as soon as we turned it on. So yeah, I don't know, actually. It's difficult, this traffic. We are doing some. I'm doing some pilot projects with customers in buildings we have built. So hopefully I can do some reports later on real measurements and maybe conclude some analysis on it as well.
And presumably it's too early to say whether it's having any impact on the network planning of the network operators on their public RAN, the fact that you've effectively got an offload in a lot of downtown office spaces. Maybe it's a little early for that, but at some point you would think it would have an impact.
Yeah, it's being discussed so far. I haven't seen any, or we haven't had any specific cases where we have seen the kind of the result of the meaning what have they done on the outside, and or at least they haven't told us yet. But yeah, it's being discussed with operators for sure, and it's really interesting because we take up. If you penetrate the building with low signal, you use more of the outdoor power to get there. Yeah, so this should have a huge impact over time, and it's going to be interesting to follow that trend actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now, I have to say, it does seem as though we could carry on this conversation for a good long while yet. But I have to admit, we are pretty much out of time. The webinar gods are frowning at me. So we'll need to move on to our next topic, which I think in many ways complements what we've heard here. So for you out there, if you're watching this and have questions or want to follow up with any of the speakers, please do drop us a line.